how to subtract decimals. So we're going to add on to what we learned yesterday with adding decimals, and we're going to subtract. Same idea as with adding decimals. So we've got student 1 and student 2. Student 1 solved it and got 10.48. Student 2 solved it and got 3.73. And I want you to look to see how each student solved it and then make a prediction right here for which student you feel solved it correctly. That's what I want. Okay. So some things we might be noticing. Student 1, they lined up all their numbers on that right side, which is what we've been taught to do when we've been subtracting since we started subtracting. Okay, so that was a good thing that student number 1 did. Student number 2 lined up their decimals. So although they did not line up their numbers all the way to the right, they lined up their decimals, which is also an important skill to do when we are subtracting. Okay, so you need to kind of combine those two. And the way that we combine those two is by lining up the decimals like student number 2 does, but then adding in a 0 placeholder, and then we can start subtracting. That way our numbers are all lined up to the right side, but our decimals are also stacked on top of each other. Okay, so for this situation, student 2 is correct. So let's do some examples. When we add, it does not matter which number we put on top or bottom of the equation. When we subtract, it does matter. The first number has to go on top. Okay, so we've got 9.87. And that has to go on the top of the problem. Then we've got 3.45. And when we do that, we line up our decimals, and then we fill in our numbers. 3.45. Now we are subtracting. So in order to solve this, we are subtracting. When we subtract, we take the top number minus the bottom number. Top minus the bottom. We cannot do the bottom minus the top. Okay, so for the situation, we do 7 minus 5. We cannot do 5 minus 7. So 7 minus 5 is 2. 8 minus 4 is 4. Drop down our decimal straight down into our answer. Notice how we've got 2 numbers after the decimal for each of these numbers. And then 9 minus 3 is 6. Just using mental math to guess and check our answer. 9 minus 3 is 6, so we know that our answer should be somewhere around 6 using those whole numbers. All right, let's do number 2, 25.7. Lining up those decimals and putting 6.42. Sorry, my pen keeps glitching out. And we are subtracting. Now, we lined up our decimals, which was great, but now we have some empty spaces that we have to put a 0. So I'm going to take my red pen and fill in those empty zeros just so you can see where we are doing that. Okay, 0 minus 2. We cannot do that, and we cannot do bottom minus top where we do 2 minus 0. So you have 0 pencils. I cannot take away 2 pencils from you if you have 0. So we have to go over to the 7 and borrow. We make the 7 into a 6 in order to make the 0 into a 10. Then we do 10 minus 2, which we can do. If you had 10 pencils, I could take 2. It would be 8. 6 minus 4 is 2. Bring down my decimals straight into my answer. 5 minus 6 I cannot do. 5 minus 6, 5 is smaller than 6, so I have to borrow from the 2 to make it a 1 in order to make this a 15. When you are borrowing, you're borrowing 10 because you're borrowing from the next place value, which there are 10 of them that make that next place value. That's why we are doing that. 15 minus 6 is 9. 1 minus 0 is 1. Okay. 25 minus 6. 25 is close to 26, and 26 minus 6 would be 20. And our answer is close to 20, so that makes sense. Okay. Let's do a couple more. 5.508 minus 3.10. 7, 4. This is an 8. So start on that right side. We've got our decimals lined up. We have a number in every single column. We're good to go. 8 minus 4 is 4. 0 minus 7, you can't take away 7 from 0, so we have to make the 5 into a 4, make the 0 into a 10. 10 minus 7 is 3. 4 minus 1, also 3. Drop our decimals straight down. 5 minus 3 is 2. 2.334. All right, if you're feeling confident, feel free to work ahead. And then to resume the video to check your answers. We've got 21.9. We line up those decimals. 1.605. Fill in those empty places with a 0. And then we can subtract. Ooh, here we're going to have to do some double borrowing because there's 2 zeros next to each other. That's interesting. Okay, so 0 minus 5. We cannot do 0 minus 5, so we look to the next number. You can't take away from 0 either. There's no number to take away and to make it less. So we have to go all the way over to the 9 and cross that off to make that an 8. When you borrow, it only makes the next place into a 10. So it can't, that 8 can't make this 0 on the far right side into 10. It makes the 10 next to it. Okay, but now we can basically start over. So we can't do 0 minus 5, so we can borrow from our 10 to make that a 9 in order to make this a 10. Okay, that double borrowing is the hardest part of subtracting for sure. Now we have numbers that we can subtract. 10 minus 5 is 5. 9 minus 0 is 0. 8 minus 6 is 2. 1 minus 1 is 0. 2 minus 0 is 2. Double check with our mental math. 21 minus 1 is 20. So we know our answer has to be somewhere around 20, and it is. Okay, let's do 2 more examples. 15.5, 8.229. It's a double borrowing. We've got to fill in the zeros and subtract. You cannot do 0 minus 9. You cannot borrow from a 0, so we've got to go all the way over to the 5 to make that a 4. The one next to it becomes a 10. We can now borrow from that 10 to make the first 0 a 10. Like I said, that double borrowing is the hardest part. 10 minus 9 is 1. 9 minus 2 is 7. 4 minus 2 is 2. Bring our decimal straight down. 5 minus 8 you cannot do, so you have to borrow to make it a 15. 15 minus 8 is 7. 7.271. All right, last one, we can skip number 8. 27.9 minus 0.905. Filling in all of our zeros. Again, we have another situation with a double borrowing. I'm trying to get you guys as much practice with this as I can. 0 minus 5 you can't do. You cannot borrow from a 0, so you've got to cross off the 9 and make it an 8. That makes the 0 next to it into a 10. Now, we still can't do 0 minus 5, so we have to borrow from that 10 to make it a 9 in order to make this a 10. 10 minus 5 is 5. 9 minus 0 is 9. 8 minus 9 we can no longer do. It used to be a 9, but now it's 8 minus 9, so we have to borrow from the 7 to make it a 6 in order to make it an 18. 18 minus 9 is 9. 6 minus 0 is 6. 2 minus 0, 2. Does it make sense that 27 minus 0 would be somewhere around 27, which is 26? Pretty close. Good enough. All right. That is how we subtract decimals. I do want to point out with number 8, although you don't have to solve it, I just want to remind you that if you have a coupon for something, it is subtraction. Okay, you may have a question on a test or a quiz or homework where it's talking about coupons. Remember, coupons are prices that are getting taken off, so they are getting subtracted. All right, and that is the end of our lesson.